Okay, year six. Look, I'm here. Look, hello. See? And look, I've got a brew and everything. I'm happy now. Happy. Thank you for all them people who were concerned that I hadn't had a cup of tea. Right, what I've done is I've kind of downloaded Skellig onto this program so as I can read it with you. You can read it along, and you can also look back on some of the questions, which is kind of helpful for you as well. So I'm going to read from chapter 8 to chapter 10 today. This is quite important, this one. Hope you're enjoying it. Hope you're liking it. You've really got to get into the teeth of it now, and you'll see who the man in the garage is starting to become. So remember, we're looking for this 27 and 53 that he asked as well. When he came down from his bath, Dad started moaning that there was no bread and there were no eggs, and in the end he said, "I know, let's have a takeaway, eh?" It was like a light went on in my head. He had the menu from the Chinese round the corner in his hand. "We'll get it in for when your mum gets back," he said. "What do you fancy?" 27 and 53, I said. "That's clever," Dad said. "You did it without even looking. What's your next trick?" He wrote it all down. Special chow mein for mum, spring rolls and pork char siu for you, beef and mushroom for me, crispy seaweed and prawn crackers for the baby, and if she won't eat them, we will. Save her right, eh? She'll be back on board in mother's milk again. He phoned the Chinese, gave the cash, and I ran round to collect it. By the time I got back home again, Mum and the baby were there. She tried to make a fuss of me and kept asking me about the journey and about school. Then the baby puked over her shoulder and she had to go get cleaned up. Dad belted through his beef and mushroom and the seaweed and prawn crackers. He said he was all clogged up with Ernie's dust, and he swigged off a bottle of beer. When he saw I was leaving half of mine, he reached over with his fork. I covered it with my arm. "You'll get fat," I said. Mum laughed. "Fatter," she said. "I'm famished," he said. "Worked like a bloomin' slave for you lot today." He reached out and tickled the baby's chin and kissed her. "Especially for you, little chick." I kept my arm in front of the food. "Fatso," I said. He lifted his shirt and grabbed his belly with his fingers. "See," said Mum. He looked at us. He dipped his finger into the sauce at the edge of the plate. "Delicious," he said. "But enough's enough. I've had ample sufficiency, thank you." Then he went to the fridge, got another beer and a great big lump of cheese. I tipped what was left of 27 and 53 into the takeaway tin and put it in the outside bin. I saw Mina again that evening. I was in the little front garden with Dad. We stood there in the thistles and dandelions. He was telling me, as usual, how wonderful it would be. Flowers here and a tree there and a bench under the front window. I saw her further along the street. She was in a tree in the other front garden on the same side of the street as us. She was sitting on a fat branch. She had a book and a pencil in her hand, and she kept sticking the pencil in her mouth and staring up into the tree. Wonder who that is. She's called Mina. Ah. She must have seen us looking at her, but she didn't move. Dad went in to check the cement in the dining room. I went out the gate and along the street and looked up at Mina in the tree. "What are you doing up there?" I said. She clicked her tongue. "Silly you," she said. "You've scared it away. Typical." "Scared what away?" "Blackbird." She put the book and the pencil in her mouth, and she swung over the branch and dropped into the garden. She stood looking at me. She was little, and she had hair as black as coal and the kind of eyes you think can see right through you. "Never mind," she said. "It'll come again." She pointed up to the rooftop. The blackbird was up there, tipping its tail back and forth and squawking. "That's a warning call," she said. "It's telling its family there's danger near." "Danger? That's you." She pointed up into the tree. "If you climb up where I was and look along that branch, you'll see its nest. There's 3 tiny ones, but don't you dare go any nearer." She sat on the garden wall and faced me. "This is where I live," she said. "Number 7. You've got a baby sister." "Yes." "What's her name?" "We haven't decided yet." She clicked her tongue and rolled her eyes towards the sky. She opened her book. "Look at this," she said. It was full of birds, pencil drawings, lots of them, coloured in blues and greens and reds. "This is a blackbird," she said. "The common, but nevertheless very beautiful. A sparrow, these are tits and lovely chaffinches. And look, this is a goldfinch that visited last Thursday." She showed me the goldfinch, the greens and reds and bright yellows in it. "My favourite," she said. She slapped the book shut. "Do you like birds?" she said, and she looked at me as if something I'd done had made her cross. "I don't know," I said. "Typical. Do you like drawing?" "Sometimes. Drawing makes you look at the world more closely. It helps you to see what you're looking at more clearly. Did you know that?" I said nothing. What colour is a blackbird? She said. Black. Typical. She swung around into the garden. I'm going in, she said. I look forward to seeing you again. I also like to see your baby sister if that can be arranged. Chapter 10. This is where it gets good, Year 6. I tried to stay awake that night, but it was hopeless. I was dreaming straight away. I dreamed that the baby was in the blackbird's nest in Mina's garden. The blackbird fed her on flies and spiders, and she got stronger and stronger until she flew out of the tree, over the rooftops and onto the garage roof. Mina sat on the back wall drawing her. When I went closer, Mina whispered, "Stay away. You're danger." Then the baby was bawling in the room next door, and I woke up. I lay listening to Mum cooing and comforting and the baby squawking and hissing. The birds were singing outside. When the feed was over and I was sure everyone was asleep, I crept out of bed and got my torch, pulled some clothes on, tiptoed past their room. I took a jar of aspirin from the bathroom, I went downstairs, opened the back door, and tiptoed into the wilderness. The takeaway trays were down under newspapers and a heap of weeds. They'd tilted over and lots of the sauce had run out. When I looked inside, the char siu was gluey and red and cold. I dropped the soggy spring rolls into the same tray and went down towards the garage. You must be stupid, I told myself. You must be going round the stupid bend. I looked up at the blackbird on the garage roof and saw how it opened its yellow beak so wide as it sang. I saw the sheens of gold and blue where the early light shone on its black. I switched on the torch, took a deep breath and stepped inside. The scuttling and scratching started. Something skittered across my foot and I nearly dropped the food. I came to the tea chest and shone my torch behind. You again, he squeaked. Thought you'd gone away. I brought you something, I said. He opened his eyes and looked at me. Aspirin, I said. And 27 and 53, spring rolls and pork char siu. He laughed, but he didn't smile. Not as stupid as you look, he squeaked. I held the takeaway tray across the tea chest towards him. He took it in his hand, but he started to wobble and I had to take it back again. No strength, he squeaked. I squeezed between the tea chests. I squatted down beside him. I held the tray up and shone the torch onto the food. He dipped his finger in. He licked his finger and groaned. Oh. He stuck his finger in again and hooked a long, slimy string of bean sprouts and sauce. He stuck his tongue out and licked. He slurped out pieces of pork and mushrooms. He shoved the spring rolls into his mouth. The red sauce trickled down from his lips, down over his chin, onto his black jacket. Ow, he said. Oh. He sounded like he was loving it or in pain, or both those things together. I held the tray closer to his chin. He dipped and licked and groaned. His fingers were twisted and stunted, and his knuckles were swollen. Put the aspirin in, he said. I put 2 aspirin in the sauce, and he picked them out and swallowed them. He belched and belched. His hand slipped to his side again. His head slumped back against the wall. Food of the gods, he whispered. 27 and 53. I put the tray down on the floor beside him and shone the torch on him. There were hundreds of tiny creases and cracks all over his pale face. A few fine, colourless hairs grew on his chin. The red sauce below his lips was like congealed blood. When he opened his eyes again, I saw tiny red veins like a dark net across the whites of his eyes. There was a smell of dust, old clothes, and dry sweat. I had a good look, he whispered. Where are you from? Nowhere. They'll clear all this out. Where will you go? What will you do? Nothing. What will you? Nothing. Nothing. And nothing. He closed his eyes again. Leave the aspirin, he said. I took the top off and put the jar on the floor. I had to push aside a little heap of hard, fairy balls. I held one up to the torchlight and saw it was made of tiny bones glued together with fur and skin. What are you looking at, eh? He said. I put it on the floor again. Nothing. The blackbird on the roof sang louder and louder. There's a doctor come to see my sister, I said. I could bring him here to see you. No. No doctors. Nobody. Who are you? Nobody. What can I do? Nothing. My baby's sister's very ill. Babies. Is there anything you can do for her? Babies. Spittle, muck, spew, tears. I sighed. It was hopeless. My name's Michael. I'm going now. Is there anything else I can bring you? Nothing. Well, 27 and 53. He belched again. His breath stank. Not just the Chinese food, but the stench of the other dead things he ate, the blue bottles, the spiders. He made a gag noise in his throat, and he leaned away from the wall like he was going to be sick. I put my hand beneath his shoulder to steady him. I felt something there, something held in by the jacket. He retched. I tried to breathe, not to smell him. I reached across his back and felt something beneath his other shoulder as well, like thin arms folded up, springy and flexible. He retched, but he wasn't sick. He leaned back against the wall, and I took my hand away. "Who are you?" I said. The blackbird sang and sang. I won't tell anybody, I said. He lifted his hand and he looked at me in the torchlight. "I'm nearly nobody," he said. "Most of me is Arthur." He laughed, but he didn't smile. "Arthritis," he squeaked. "He's the one that's ruining me bones, turns you to stone, then crumbles it away." He touched his swollen knuckles. "What's on your back?" I said. "A jacket, then a bit of me, then lots and lots of Arthur." I tried to slip my hand beneath his shoulder again. "No good," he squeaked. "Nothing there's no good no more." "I'm going," I said. "I'll keep them from clearing the place out. I'll bring you more. I won't bring Dr. Death." He licked the dry sauce from below his lips. 27 and 53, he said. 27 and 53. I left him, backed away towards the door, went out into the light. The blackbird flew over the gardens, squawking. I tiptoed into the house. I stood for a minute at the baby's cot. I put my hand beneath the blanket and felt the rattling of her breath and how soft and warm she was. I felt how tender her bones were. Mum looked up at me and I could tell she was still asleep. "Hello," she whispered. I tiptoed back to bed. When I slept, I dreamed that my bed was all twigs and leaves and feathers, just like a nest. Okay, year 6. So I'm going to stop it there, but I'm also going to give you some activities to do that involve a PowerPoint, this one here. Okay, you need to answer the questions. You need to work through it. So your PowerPoint is going to be this one, and I'll go through that in a minute with you on a different video. Okay, thank you very much. See you in a minute.